just back a little bit. Yeah,
Oh,
flat.
thank you. Yeah,
There
we
we
don't
go.
want the
Do I have anything
perfect
weird?
collar up. No.
No.
Just my
Nothing
normal weird
Right.
face. Okay.
Nothing weird.
3, 2, 1.
Hi and welcome to our Facebook Live session on annexation. I'm Yael Cassandra, the city's communication director, and I'm joined here by Corporation Counsel Philippa Guthrie and the Mayor of Bloomington, John Hamilton. Thanks everyone for being here today. We
Thanks.
thought it would be helpful to our residents and prospective residents to join in a conversation about some of the issues that folks have about annexation. We've been receiving a lot of feedback about our annexation, and maybe it would help, maybe just for starters, to go back to the beginning, talk a little bit about why we're doing this now before we get into the specific granular questions. Mayor, could you maybe give us a little roundup?
Sure. And thanks for being here. By the way, you may not, you see we're all sitting here without masks. We're all vaccinated. We wouldn't be sitting here this way if we weren't, but we are all. So we know we can do that safely. So annexation is a long word with a long history. Bloomington has annexed as most cities do in our whole history. It's how cities grow through time, their boundaries change. You know, Bloomington started with I think a 6 square block kind of area back in 1818, and we have grown ever since in pieces and bits, and as neighborhoods develop, the city boundaries grow out with them, and annexation is the legal process by which a city does that. And I guess in a way, annexation happens for the same reason that cities happen at all. I mean, cities happen because a concentration of people come together and live and they decide that it makes sense not to just live in an unincorporated rural area, but to have the services that an intenser group of people, more dense group of people want. They want sanitation pickup, they want streets plowed as a community comes together, they want to plan how the community grows, they want police services, fire services, parks departments, and other things to help the community have the amenities that make it a thriving community. So Bloomington has done that for all of our history, except for the last 17 years we stopped annexing. So what we're doing now is basically trying to adjust the boundaries to reflect where people live, the denser areas around Bloomington.
So a normal practice, we've done it hundreds of times, I guess, over
I
200
think so.
years,
Yeah.
600 plus maybe. Incredible, except for the last 17. Well, our listeners, our followers have sent in questions over the last few weeks about annexation and have some pretty good ones. So we do invite you to join in this conversation in the comments section on Facebook, so please go ahead and put your questions in there if you haven't already submitted them. There's also a form on our website at bloomington.in.gov/annex, and you can fill it in there. So we are going to get to the questions we've already received first, and we'll try to get through them so we can answer any questions coming in. First off, so our listener asks, why is Cook Medical Headquarters not part of the annexation zone? It looks like the boundary was explicitly drawn around the private property of Cook Inc. Is there any clarification there?
Yes, so in 2017, after our annexation was stopped by the legislature, Cook approached us and we agreed to an agreement in lieu of annexation. And what that is it lasts for 15 years, so this would be 15 years from 2017. And this is an agreement whereby we agreed not to annex their properties. If they will, in exchange for that, they will pay a negotiated amount instead of what they would have normally been assessed. And it's allowed under state law for the benefit of both parties. And the benefit for the city is in the agreement, and it includes things like employment growth, designated goals for employment growth, and it had to do partly with the fact that they were taking the old Westinghouse site and completely renovating it and reusing it. So that's why they are not part of the annexation.
I see. So the as an economic development asset, it
Yes.
seemed like a fair trade.
Right.
All right, you can always find out more about this and other questions that we may be covering at our frequently asked questions. That's at bloomingtonin.gov/city/annex. All right, so that question, by the way, was from Sam. Thanks, Sam. Our next question comes from Karen, who very simply asks, I'd like to know how this affects me.
Well, it depends on where you live and what your situation is, Karen. If you're already a city resident, it won't affect you much, except that it kind of expands the city to welcome more people in who will participate in elections and democracy and the community as a whole. If you're in an area intended for annexation, it really does depend. If you become part of the city, you will get some more services, like sanitation services, like plowing your roads from the street department. You'll get the parks department that will be investing in your neighborhood and that kind of thing, police coverage, etc. And also your taxes will change if you're joining the city and not being part of the city. Now, it's really hard to tell you exactly, but we can send you to the website where you can look up, if you have a parcel, you know where you live, if this is what you're talking about, where you live, then you can look that up and directly. It's maybe worth noting that the average or median residential impact, I think, is about $600, is that right?
Something like
dollars
that,
a
yeah.
year in changes in taxes. And I know nobody likes to pay more taxes, none of us does, but it's how the city functions and provides the kind of services that build the thriving city that we have. So you have to look that up online. If you're, anyway, let's.
That's right. And if you are in an area that's proposed for annexation, you can look up your specific tax impact on our website.
Yeah, we have a lookup tool for every parcel.
Or call us if you'd rather. You can just call us or come in and we'll sit down with you and talk about it directly.
Yeah, we should mention our legal department's also holding office hours, so you
Yes.
can come in next Thursday and the Thursday after and ask your very specific questions. So thanks, Karen. Our next question comes from Ron, who says that he urges the mayor and the council to come up with alternative funding to make up for the $500,000 plus a year shortfall projected to affect our schools as a result of annexation. If this budgetary shortfall cannot be covered, annexation plans should be nixed, Ron says.
Well, it's a good comment, question. We work very closely with the school corporation, and kind of implicit in that question is the fact that as city boundaries change, the tax implications for other entities can be relevant, whether it's county government or the school corporation or townships or the solid waste district or a library, other places like that. And we've been talking with them extensively about that. And actually, the school corporation, as you would expect, has gone through this kind of annexation many, many times. One of the main impacts of the annexation tax impact is actually related to the tax caps, which is probably way too much to get into right now. But we work very closely with the school corporation and actually are collaborating on this, like we do many ways with schools on parks. We like to locate parks next to schools, on transportation, and so there's actually some significant benefits to the school corporation that we can grow with them. Just one example is Bachelor Middle School, which if it's part of the school, if it's part of the city, it can be on a bus line, it can be integrated differently with the park system and other things. So we'll continue to work really closely with them, but the boundaries of the city are really not driven by specific tax revenue implications, but by what makes sense for the community. Now, I don't know if do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I would just add that the fiscal plan, which is on the website and has a lot of information in it, it's very large, but it does show the tax impacts on the other governmental units. And the annexation, we have proposed that it would not take effect until 2024, and the tax effects would actually not be felt until 2025, because in Indiana we assess taxes and they are paid a year later. And over the 4 years of growth before taxes would be owed and collected, our projections show that there wouldn't actually be a loss because the levy growth and assessed value growth would more than compensate for that.
That's a good point.
So it would be, in the interim, maybe a loss on paper, but the actual.
Yeah.
Well, no loss in the interim, nothing happens for
Yeah.
the 4-year period.
Exactly. I see, yeah.
And then when
Okay.
it does start,
When it starts.
as Philippa said, it's
Yeah.
really,
The growth.
there will be
of
growth that
Mm-hmm.
will have happened that will overpass any of that
Yeah.
by then. Yeah.
All right, well, that's interesting. Always more at bloomington.in.gov/NX. All right, now our next question comes from James. And James says, I read online that sewers may be made available to homeowners who are not currently connected and who desire the service. When the plan first appeared 4 years ago, I was told at the City Building Information Open House that sewers would not be made available in our area. Has this changed? My wife surveyed homeowners in this area several years ago to assess their desires for sewers. City sewers exist on Walnut Street Pike, within a half mile both north and south of our home, and now Holland Fields has sewers within 100 yards. How did they do that? What are our chances, and how soon?
Well, sewer would be offered if feasible. So what happens is the utilities department will assess your particular area and what it would involve. But we hope to, if possible, provide sewer to anybody in the city. But it wouldn't be assessed unless your area actually was ultimately annexed, and then they would come out and look at the situation and see what can be done. So.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds exactly right. We want to extend sewers as much as feasible. It's better environmentally, it's better economically in many ways in the long run to have a kind of a centralized, well-run sewer system rather than a bunch of little ones or a bunch of septics that often, eventually kind of fail. So we do like to do that, but there are sometimes geographic or topographical challenges that make it quite expensive to do it in a particular area. But if you had that kind of conversation a few years ago, James, then I assume that was probably based on topography or geography. If sewer mains get closer, then the economics can be different. So I'm happy to talk to you if you have questions. You may want to talk a little more detail about the specifics of that. But we like to extend sewers wherever we can. We can't always do it. There are people in the city today who don't have sewer service for some of those same reasons, I think, right?
And there are others who have paid a little extra, or more than a little extra, if the neighborhood all contributes to a force main or something because of the geography. So that may be an option as well.
Yeah. I wanted to remind everyone that we're here for a Facebook Live conversation about annexation, the city's proposed annexation. The City Council will be hearing this proposal on August the 4th, starting at 3 p.m.
Yeah, the public comment.
The public comment section. Since this is a complicated issue, we thought we'd come to you in this Facebook Live session, giving you the opportunity to ask your questions. Please do go ahead and put your questions in the comment section if you have any, or fill out the form online. I'm Yael Cassandra here with Philippa Guthrie, our Corporation Counsel, and Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton. And we're doing our best to answer your questions, the ones that have come in on the forum and on Facebook over the last few days. So this one's about sidewalks and bike paths, one of my favorite things. There is a question from Kara who asks, is it likely that a sidewalk or bike path will be installed on the west side of Smith Road between Moores Pike and Rogers Road? Oh yes, in the event of annexation. This is a high traffic road with no shoulders and is also used by pedestrians and cyclists. New sidewalk ramps were just installed at the Moores Pike intersection. The one going northwest and southeast lead to already built sidewalks and are in the city limits. They also installed one on the southwest leading to no sidewalk but rather into a telephone pole. If this annexation occurs and there's more city to the south, will this stub be connected to something? Thanks, Kara.
You want me to take that, or do you want to?
Well, you start and I'll add.
All right,
maybe.
yeah, it's I can't give you a yes or no on that probably. Sorry, Kara. Let me just make a few comments. Cities, and when you're in the city, we do work very hard to do as much connectivity as we can, and we have resources that a county doesn't in ways to expand connectivity through trails and such. Sidewalks are typically done through the private owners or through a development. Side paths are often done by the city. We have 30 plus miles of side paths, I think, that we've built through the Parks Department. So both the Public Works Department and the Parks Department in city limits work very hard to expand connectivity. An exact answer on that question will depends a lot in terms of timing and money, how that could be done. But we do very much try to continue to invest in expanding connectivity through trails and sidewalks, and that's one of the benefits of having the city encompassing the urbanized areas is we can kind of plan short and long term how we improve that connectivity. And
Yes.
sorry about running into a telephone pole.
Yeah.
Important to know that we have been expanding trail
Yes.
connectivity right and left.
Yes.
I mean, we just dedicated a new one on Henderson not
Yeah.
long ago.
Right, and we do add sidewalks. We have some resources for that. We have a bicycle and pedestrian commission, which is very active, and they make recommendations, they do analyses. Our engineering department and planning departments do as well. And the council has a sidewalk fund that they often deploy in this fashion for high trip, maybe areas that you're talking about where there is a lot of use and a lot of risk, so.
It's worth noting, Kara, that if you're in the city, then you can serve on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee and get in there and say, hey, why don't we think about this? Whereas if you're not in the city, it's you can't serve on a lot of those boards and commissions that we have that steer a lot of where the city goes.
Yeah, or the Council on Accessibility, or the Environmental Commission. I mean, all kinds of opportunities that might dovetail with your interests. Okay, thanks. Our next question comes from Jenny, who says, my property is part of the annexation, but I haven't gotten any notices. I purchased my home and property in early 2020, and I think your records aren't up to date. Also, I'm curious about whether I'll be required to join city sewer lines. Thanks.
I can
You want to take
one.
that first?
Yeah, so the statute for annexation requires us, when we are sending notices, to use the most current tax rolls at the county auditor's office, so that's what we used. We did get some returned mailings, and we have corrected those, and we hope that in the next round, what ones that we found will be corrected. So you're probably in there, and they seem to be from 2020 and 2021. And that's a lot for, I'm sure, the auditor to correct. So, there are a lot of property transfers, so it clearly happens a little more slowly than you might think. If you would like a packet, you can just email us and we will send you your packet, and that will tell you what you need to know. What was the second part of the question?
She wants to know if she will be required to join city sewer lines.
No, you're not required to join city sewer lines. If you want them, we work with you, but it's not a requirement.
We encourage it. We encourage it.
Yeah.
Because, but yeah, and if you want the packet, just let us know. Thanks, because we'll get it out to you.
Yeah, and
It's a big packet, isn't it?
It's a map and a letter, and it gives them
A few
information.
pages?
Yeah, a few pages,
All right.
I think.
I note here that you can also call City Legal at 812-349-3426, not to create more work for your
Oh,
department.
that's all right. That's why we're here.
All right. Okay, thanks, Jenny. We have a question next from Sarah, who broaches the topic of waivers. I know that the word has been floated around quite a bit, and some people may not understand what a waiver is. She says she doesn't have one on file. What are the waivers? And do I need one?
Well, If you don't have one, you don't need one right now. So it's a remonstrance waiver is what it's called. So the state code requires cities, when you extend sewer outside of the boundaries, to get a waiver of remonstrance from the homeowner. And this is essentially a contract between the homeowner and the city. In exchange for extension of sewer service, the homeowner agrees not to object or contest an eventual annexation. So we have a lot of waivers in areas outside of the city because we've extended our sewer fairly extensively. We didn't get them on all properties. It was spotty over the years, so it's hard to tell, but certainly since 2016 and before, we've been trying to get them whenever we extend sewer. So if you don't have one, that means that it wasn't required when you, for some reason, when you got sewer.
Yeah, I might note too, I was just talking to a former mayor not long ago who just reminded me and said, the city very intentionally identified where sewer should be extended, where development should happen, and it was very intentional about that through planning and actually with the county, and there were areas intended for annexation. And as you said, generally the process was, when the sewers were extended outside the city, it was like a deal. We will extend the sewers. You agree either to come in the city right now sometimes, or if for whatever reason the annexation wasn't happening right then, signed a waiver that said, I won't object, I won't remonstrate, I won't protest the annexation whenever it happens. So that's what the waivers are talking about.
I see. All right. We remind everyone that a public hearing on annexation will be taking place August the 4th at 3 o'clock in council chambers at City Hall, and you can also—
Or remotely, right?
That's exactly right. You can participate via Zoom, and that link will be posted on the city website on the calendar. So that's what we're talking about today, annexation, with Mayor Hamilton and Corporation Counsel Philippa Guthrie. And I'm Yael Cassander. Please feel free to bring us your questions on the city website or on Facebook Live. And so we'll try our best to answer them. We are getting through the ones that we received a little earlier. And our next one comes from Terry. Thanks, Terry. So this question is a trashy question. It's about trash. On trash service, I'm not sure who we is, but we produce 10 95-gallon bins per week based on the city charge that is $188 a month. But, Terry says, I can find no law or ordinance that covers that if we get the lowest price bin, $4, that we have to use it, therefore bypassing city trash. I'm a little confused. Am I correct on this?
Well, we can talk about that a little bit. I'm not sure if that's an enormous amount of trash for a 1 to 4 family household, if I heard it right.
That sounds like a commercial.
It sounds commercial to me.
And we don't cover commercial.
Right,
Okay.
so city sanitation is extended to all the households in the city that are 1 to 4 unit households. That is, if your building has 1 to 4 households, duplex, single, quad. But we don't pick up trash from any large apartment buildings or anything more than 5 or more, or any commercial places. So that sounds more like a commercial facility, which you just can keep doing whatever you do now to contract. But if you are a resident of a 1 or 4 household building, then we provide the trash. There's a cart that we provide. There's a monthly charge, and there's a weekly pickup of trash and a free weekly pickup of recycling. That will be different. That'll be a new service you get.
And you have a choice of 3 different sizes of carts. And there's also curbside recycling. You get a cart for recycling as well.
So I pick the smallest carts for both.
Yeah.
And I usually, it's been fine, though sometimes I cram in the recycling, gets a little tighter after a big family weekend, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
But then you can actually adjust the size too,
Yeah.
if you want to.
And
We've
if-
delayed by a week too, sometimes.
Yeah.
If you have a big
Yeah.
event, you can request an
Yes,
additional
you can
one.
request an additional.
Or you can
one.
ask your neighbor if you can put a little extra in their cart that week in exchange for them doing the same when
That's
they
a
have
good-
the
that's a good
in-laws
point.
visiting,
We have a handy tool on our website also, where if you're wondering, am I allowed to throw away live snakes,
Oh,
or
right.
am I allowed to
No.
throw away microwaves? You know, you can
Yeah.
add that to
Oh,
the
I didn't
website.
even know that.
Yeah, and it's right there, bloomington.in.gov.
But I'm sorry.
Oh, and
Are
you
saying-
can, it will tell you if you are able to recycle it, or if it belongs in the
That's
trash,
great.
or if you need to take it down to the solid waste.
But sanitation is one of the services that reflects kind of a denser community that we need to manage the trash. And it's actually a lot more efficient to have one truck come down a street and pick up all the trash than have residents each contract with 6 different companies to do it at different times. So there are some efficiencies of that, and we're proud of the modernized sanitation system that you get when you're part of the city.
Yeah, we also unified our utilities and sanitation bills, which is great. You just get one bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many great things about our sanitation department. All right, so someone has a very simple question, no name here, but the question is, what is the impact on the city with fire districts?
Not a simple question.
Not
You wanna
simple,
try
not
that one?
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
So after the annexation process had been stopped in
Illegally
2017,
stopped.
illegally stopped.
Yeah, thank you.
In 2019, the legislature passed a law that said if you are a fire protection district of a certain size, and it was by assessed value of the covered area, if that area is annexed, any area that is covered by that fire district is annexed, the city annexing may not provide the fire service. It would stay with the fire district. So there were 1 or 2 districts in the state that qualified under that law, and the Monroe Fire Protection District was one of them. So the city cannot provide fire services in areas that are annexed that are currently covered by the fire district. So we will not be doing that. You may notice if you go to the website and see the fiscal plan, in the event that there is some change, or we just wanted to be sure, because it's a new law, that in the event we were required to provide service, we gave 2 scenarios. One is the costs and the analysis without us providing fire, and then an analysis with us providing fire. So you would see that there.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, I think, I think that was a really ill-advised state law because it doesn't even allow people to choose which fire service they want, which you would think at least folks ought to be able to opt in or out if they wanted as a group to do that. And it also, as you mentioned, the tax, actually some of the significant amount of the cost that people see in their changes in taxes is because the Monroe County Fire District expense is quite a bit higher than the city fire service expense. So when you're in the city, we deduct what you would have paid for the city fire, but then you're added what you pay for the rural district, which is quite a bit higher than that. So it's kind of complicated. It's a simple question, but unfortunately it's a complicated answer. And if you have more questions about it, please feel free to reach out to us.
And if you have any specific questions about your parcel or something that you'd like to take up with the legal department, we invite you to come to our office hours. The legal department is holding office hours both next Thursday and the following Thursday, and we'll see where it goes after that. But you can sign up for that by going to our website. Thanks for joining us today on Facebook. We are getting through your questions, which are really stimulating here. This has to do with the criteria for annexation, and this resident asks, I am aware of only 4 allowable criteria for annexation. Are these stated correctly? Okay, so
It's a legal task.
I think I'm looking at you, Philippa. So the criteria that this writer, I don't know where this person lives, but I have a feeling it's Area 7 because he or she indicates that. Minimum population density of 3 persons per acre, that's one criterion. A 60% subdivision, already zoned business, commercial, or industrial, that's another criterion, I guess, stipulated by the state. And finally, when a city is currently involved in supporting an economic development project, and the city's made a commitment to invest capital resources. That would be the fourth. Is this happening? Are there other criteria that can be applied? And if so, please cite the relevant parts of the Indiana Code. Whew.
You have
And
that.
I
you
don't
have
have
that
letters.
memorized,
No,
don't you?
I don't have
And
it.
please explain how that might apply to Area 7, and we should mention where Area 7 is and all that.
It's the north one.
Purple.
Purple one.
Can you see
Purple.
that up there? That's
So the
purple.
northernmost part of
Mhm.
this area.
So those criteria are not actually the criteria for, that allow you to annex. Those are just factors that if you end up in a remonstrance trial, so we were talking about waivers, under some circumstances, after an annexation has been voted on by the council, it could end up in a remonstrance trial, which is homeowners objecting to it, suing essentially. And those are factors that a court takes into consideration when looking at whether an annexation was done properly and is legitimate. So those are not reasons to annex, really. There are criteria that you must meet in order to be able to annex, the primary one being that an annexation area that you propose must be at least 1/8 contiguous to the existing border. So that's probably the primary one, but those others are not actually criteria for doing an annexation.
And 1/8 contiguous, just as I think about that in my head, if you had a perfect square that was being annexed and one boundary was completely connected, that would be 1/4 contiguous.
Right.
If you had an octagon, I guess, and you had one of the
Yeah.
8 sides, that's 1/8. But if you had a peninsula going way out, that may not qualify. If you just had
Might
a
not,
little,
yeah.
might not. So
I
Depending on where
see.
the border.
So it has to be a
gotta be
somewhat
kinda
substantial.
connected to the city and not what they used to call those spider tiffs or
Yeah,
something where you reach
spider
out.
annexation.
Spider-
You used to
spider
be able to
annexation.
just annex a road to
Yeah.
get to a subdevelopment, and you can't do that anymore.
Huh.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting. All right. Okay. Well, we are moving along then. Our next question, also from an anonymous submitter, is: were city leaders afraid that they would be voted out? Was that the reason the elections will take place 2 months before annexation will start?
Well, no, we're not afraid, but you do point out the timing. And annexation, again, is set a lot of it by state law, and then a lot of it was set by the litigation that happened. But we know in annexation under state law, I think there's a window of time that the effective date needs to be. It can't be too long. I think, is it 3 years?
You can
Is it?
extend it out 3 years.
Up to 3
Up to
years.
3 years.
And the original annexation that we planned in 2017, if it had not been illegally stopped by the state legislature, we'd be done. And you'd be welcome to vote in the next election. But it wasn't. It was stopped, and we had to go through years of litigation, actually, to get that solved. And we had to restart the annexation, begin again. And it's actually a little tricky because if we tried to get the annexation effective soon enough to be in the next election, it would actually have to go quite quickly, and we would have much less than the 4-year transition time and planning. It would be more like 1 year for the school system to deal with it, for us to shift our budgets, for the county highway system to share with the streets department of the city how we're gonna move that way. And we need to do our annual budget planning. So it really was not possible to do it so fast that we would be ready for the next election. And then we make it effective really at the next January. That makes sense. And I know that's not what some people like to hear, but we welcome you to vote. We think it'd be great for more people to participate in the city. I will only note that if you're thinking about, well, what am I doing, when am I getting, and when do I get to vote, you wouldn't pay taxes under this new system until May of 2025, because the assessment will be in 24. May 25, Well, within 2 years of May 25, you'll get to vote in a city election, so halfway through, so it's actually kind of a 2-year delay.
But services, I guess, would go in the year before.
Yeah.
They begin.
Yeah, they begin. I would point out also that there will need to be redistricting for city council. That depends on what areas might be annexed.
And any idea about timing for that?
No.
Just before the next election.
Yeah.
But we welcome you into the city to vote for or against anybody you want to, and to participate in the boards and commissions and those kinds of things.
All right, thanks for the question. All right, we're getting through some of your questions during this discussion on annexation, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Yael Cassander, the communications director for the city, here with Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton and Philippa Guthrie, who is our corporation counsel, and we're doing our best to answer your questions about annexation. So this question is, well, more of a statement from someone who says, I do not want it. My taxes will go up. I pay enough now. I'm retired. My husband passed away in 2019. He was a war vet. I want to keep my home, please. How can we respond to this resident?
Well, I don't know your particular circumstances, but I can say that if you are over 65 and the assessed value of your home is $200,000 or less, you are in luck, because there is, under state law, there is a provision for you that means that you can never be assessed more than 2% in taxes. So annexation should actually be better for you than right now, because if you consider things like lower utility cost for people who are in the city versus those who are out, and some other things, you actually, we averaged the number of people who would that we could tell would qualify for that tax break, and the average savings was about $71. So
In a year.
In a year, yeah. If you fit into that category and you meet the other criteria that are required, then you should be okay.
And look, I'm sorry for your loss and your feelings, and we welcome you. Actually, why don't you call us and reach out or email? We'd be happy to talk about your individual circumstance. We certainly want to help everybody thrive. One thing we haven't mentioned that's a little different, it sounds like you own your home, which is great. I should note that for renters in the city, once you're in city limits, we do a very careful and good job of protecting renters as well, in terms of inspections and trying to make sure their homes are safe and habitable regularly. And if you own your home, just please contact us and we can talk about the situation that you're in.
Thanks. All right, here's another question we've received. So this homeowner says, as a homeowner in the proposed annexation area, the southeast sector, the Highlands, I'm wondering if the city will address the drainage issues as pertains to the country club golf course stormwater draining into the neighborhood. Our home alone has already had 2 flood losses incurred, as the drain right in our yard could not handle the rainwater, and the yards of 10 homes became essentially a river with a current. We have now incurred over $13,000 in damages, and we can't find help from the county to alleviate these issues.
I can actually answer that question, even though it's very specific. We were speaking with some homeowners in an area, I think it was that area, and it may be one of these homeowners because they asked that question, and we told them that we would get back to them. So I did speak with our utilities director, Vic Kelson. So we don't generally, that sounds like 2 private entities, a private homeowner or a number of them, and a private club. We don't normally fix or generally fix problems that happen between private homeowners. However, that situation is interesting, and it parallels some things we've done in the past. So for example, If there is city infrastructure that's problematic, or I guess it would be county infrastructure that we're taking over, we would fix that. So we would work on a solution for that. In addition, we have worked with private homeowners, and I can think of one example, or I was given one example. It was a private homeowner and, say, a business that was causing a similar kind of problem with flooding. And what we did was we helped them work out a solution together so that they didn't have to go into litigation. And we helped install the infrastructure. So that is also a possibility. And the third thing is that we have funds in the utilities budget has funds to help neighborhoods. There are neighborhood grants. So for example, it could be a single homeowner who has an issue, who applies for a grant, and it goes to a committee who evaluates it, and then we use that fund to help you fix your problem. You would have to work with an engineer of your choice. It can also be a number of homeowners who have a similar or a collective problem, and they can also apply for a grant. So those are some possible options.
All kinds of green infrastructure things like bioswales
Yes,
and rain gardens.
rain gardens, that
things
kind of thing could be a solution, absolutely. Depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, so that's great. We have that grant program, which you mentioned, which is new, relatively new, that the Utilities Department did. And as you mentioned, there's about $400,000 a year that goes into a green stormwater fund budget to try to help deal with those. Again, each individual circumstance may be different, but we'd welcome talking with you and trying to work together to see what we could help do.
All right. So our next question from someone in the area says, the national standard number of police officers per 1,000 residents is 1.6. With the annexation, Bloomington will be just over 100,000 residents. The BPD currently has 92 officers. Does this mean Bloomington will be adding 50 or more officers to the BPD in order to properly protect and serve the residents of the new and existing areas of the city?
So thanks for that question. Let me just first say on that number ratio, we pay a lot of attention to having adequate police protection in the city. Often people don't calculate in the IU police, which is a wholly separate police force that serves a lot of our community as well, and other entities that provide services. But we would, if any part is annexed and if any significant annexation happens, we will be adding police officers. I think the fiscal plan actually projects a number that is a couple dozen-ish, maybe 30, something like that. To get us to the appropriate level that we think will take to provide those services. And that's again kind of a reason why the 3 or 4 year phase-in is helpful to grow our police force. It's worth noting that the sheriff's department would have less jurisdiction. At the same time, the police department has more jurisdiction, so sometimes there's even personnel exchanges, transfers that can happen in that circumstance. And again, this is something we've done a lot as the city of Bloomington has grown, as our police department grows, and we look forward to managing that and working with all the other, I think there's 7 other law enforcement agencies or something like that that operate that we'll be working with together.
Yeah, I would also add that we have resource officers, which are not sworn officers, but it's a way of adding resources to the police office that are slightly different. They can handle calls that would otherwise be handled by officers. They are generally social workers or psychologists, so they do things like de-escalate or take calls that don't require an armed officer. And they've been a huge help. So just looking at those ratios doesn't take into account something like that program that we started a few years ago.
Right. So our community resource specialists and our social workers who really complement the sworn officers. Yeah. Okay. So let's see if we have some additional questions here. It looks like things are actively coming in here. In the meantime, as this question is someone is actually typing, I would add that the public hearing taking place August 4th on annexation in the City Council chambers. You can also join by Zoom. And in the meantime, you can share your questions with us over the website. You can call the Office of the Mayor at 349-3406, if that's correct. You can also join a conversation with a lawyer over the next couple of Thursdays. They're having office hours, and you can have a one-on-one conversation with a member of our legal department. We're talking about the city's proposed annexation, resumed this year after it being illegally interrupted in 2017. So anyway, please do add your questions to the Facebook comments. And it looks like, we have an answer, an additional answer as far as the BPD question is concerned. Looks like the fiscal plan estimates adding between 26 and 34 BPD personnel.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so that was someone in the back room gave us those questions. So I think for the moment, until additional questions come in, that is all we have so far. Are there any points that you feel like we should really reiterate about this process?
Well, look, I know there are different takes on annexation. It's interesting, mostly the people inside the city hear about annexation and they kind of go, ho hum, that's not going to affect me, and the people just in the proposed annexation areas tend to focus on the impact. I think I would just say from my seat as mayor, when I'm trying to think about the future of the city, it's really maybe ask people to get up to the 50,000 foot level, almost literally, and look down at our city and think about what we should look like in the future. And I think it is important for the future of the city that those who are part of our community, and there are so many neighborhoods that may not be technically in the city. They have a Bloomington address, but they may not be technically in the city. They work in the city. They may go to school in the city. They do all kinds of things, shopping and other things in the city. It's actually good for the city in the long run to have everybody participate together to vote on council members and mayor and to be participating in figuring out the future of the city. And so, it's unfortunate that the city stopped annexing for quite a while, and that was maybe because the legislature is making it harder and harder to annex. But it's really, I think, important for the future, and I hope people, will take that 50,000 foot level and say, well, what should the city look like in the next 10 years and 20 years and 30 years as we grow?
I would also just add that on the website we have frequently asked questions, and those are ones that we have been asked over the last 4 years, starting in 2017, and they're common ones that people seem to have about annexation. And if you have additional ones, we have a form on the annexation website, so please send them in. We are responding to them. So.
So we do have another question that just came in, and this is very specific, and it has to do with livestock. So someone asks, can annexed properties keep their horses, goats, and chickens once their property's inside the city limits?
Yes, they will be grandfathered.
What does that mean?
They can keep them. Nothing will change with your animals.
We should note there are
we have
the city
chickens
already
anyway.
the city already allows 5 chickens, no roosters.
No roosters, right.
But if you have a rooster now, you get to keep it.
But as we found out talking to a homeowners association, if your homeowners association doesn't allow chickens, you still can't have them because your homeowners association rules trump that. So.
Whether you're in the city or not.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So as far as land use issues, those are grandfathered in.
Yes, if they are uses that are not allowed currently in the city, they would be called non-conforming uses, and they can stay indefinitely until the homeowner makes a change, and then they would have to comply with the zoning. That's the way different zoning that is absorbed is usually handled. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we have extensive answers to those questions again on the frequently asked question page. Well, seeing nothing else at this point, I think that we're ready to adjourn. But I do encourage everyone to go to our website at bloomingtonin.gov/annex, and you can find out not only your specifics about your property. When you go to the lookup tool, you just add your address, and you can find out everything about tax impact, etc. You can find answers to frequently asked questions. You can see a whole map. You can see which areas 1 through 7 you might be in, and we also invite you to speak with our legal department Thursdays if you'd like to make an individual appointment. So for now, I will bid you adieu, and with us are Philippa Guthrie, our Corporation Counsel, and Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Enjoyed
Thanks
it.
for joining.